let's go ahead and bring in our guest, Lee Spieckerman. Hey, Lee, how you doing today?
How are you?
Blessed and highly favored, as always. Really appreciate you coming through. Not a lot of people on the right are courageous enough as you. So, again, appreciate you for coming through the show. Did you get a chance to hear any of my rant?
Well, I wouldn't call it a rant. I would call it a brilliant dissertation. But I did, and I think, I think the biggest problem, Sonnie, of course I read the article to which you alluded, and I think he's got it totally wrong. I think he's misreading what the issue really is. The issue for conservatives, in my opinion, is that many on the left and many in the kind of in the middle that are unaligned and don't identify strongly with a particular philosophy are scared of conservatives. They think that they're racist. They think that they're intolerant. And, a fundamental tenet of our Judeo-Christian ethic and tradition in this country is helping your fellow man, loving thy neighbor as thyself. And a lot of conservatives, certainly in their rhetoric, and certainly the politicians and pundits, are not upholding that. They're not encouraging that. Instead, they're stoking anger. And believe me, I know they're doing it on the left as well. But the conservatives have a branding problem, and the issue is not because they're quote-unquote conservative. The problem is that conservatism has become a term shorthand for intolerant and racist, and that is and that just turns people off. Now you know, and
that is hold on.
Alluded to
I'm glad you said that, because that's done on purpose. And matter of fact, I have a clip that I want to play that fits in perfectly with what you just said. So I'll play the GOP clip.
First, let me answer. You started off this premise of how does Tucker Carlson get 3 million viewers every night? A recent Morning Consult poll said that 23% of Republican males are okay with white nationalist, white supremacist views. That's 1 in 4 Republican males and 9% of all Americans. So there's an audience out there. It's still a fringe. It's still a minority, but it's a fringe. What the Democrats need to do, and it's so obvious at this point, is brand them with it, is basically take this replacement theory and now make it the Republican racist replacement theory. Make every Republican answer, do you believe in it or not? Brand every Republican, this is the party of the replacement theory. Take what is a sliver, or I'm a real minority, but a minority, and make it the entire raison d'etre of the Republican Party. Do the same thing with violence. It's the RV party. It's the Republican violence party. Brand them this is judo, the very, very heinous things that they stand for and are hiding behind. Brand them on it. Take a branding iron, put it on them so that any mainstream Republican has to wear that badge and go, are you voting Republican? Do you understand you're voting for the replacement theory? Do you believe in that? Is that what you stand for? Do you believe that immigrants are coming over to replace white people and it's part of a Jewish cabal planning this whole thing and through interracial marriage? Do you believe, because that's the Republican platform. So make the Republicans own it.
Miles, you've got some money in a political operation.
So,
you going to cut that ad?
Okay, that's good. So that is not it is not an accident coming from the left. They purposely do it, but the right gives them so much material to work with. Like it is consistently and constantly coming from the right that they are giving them and feeding them all of this ammunition they have to then turn around and brand them. And again, what he said was take what they already believe and make them answer for it.
Well, and I think that was a great clip, and it's always good to hear from the other side, because that's a good indicator of how you need to adapt and what you're going to be encountering. And I think, the whole point about replacement theory really is frustrating to me, because conservatives say that their ideas and their beliefs are fundamental, that they are that they are enduring. And if those conservative ideas are so good and so strong and so compelling, then why do so many conservatives believe or act like they believe that they only work for white people. If I told you, Sonnie, that there is a group of voters in this country where President Biden only has a 26% approval rating, a group of voters in this country where President Biden right now has a 26% approval rating, you know what that group is? Hispanics. Mm-hmm. And yet we have a lot of white people that are afraid that if more Hispanics, and a lot of Republican operatives afraid if more Hispanics are in the voting bloc, they're going to default to the Democratic Party. So that, on its face, even right now, even with the Republicans doing a lousy job and giving the left ammunition, as you aptly point out, Biden only has a 26% approval rating. So if our ideas are so strong and good, why are we afraid that they are not compelling enough to motivate people that are not white to vote conservative? So right there you have it is racism. It's basically, well, our ideas will work with white people and white people will listen to us, but those non-white people, they don't get it. There's something wrong with them. They are easily hypnotized by the left. They're not hypnotized by the left, as you well know, and as you point out frequently. Conservatives, and especially Republicans, and by the way, I don't consider them one and the same, do not even talk to non-white voters in any kind of substantive, meaningful way. And then we wonder why they don't trust conservatives. So, as you say, the right keeps giving the left ammunition. The left takes advantage of it, which you can't blame them for. My fundamental definition of conservatism is pro-Americanism. It is not about austerity. It's not about a lot of things that we hear about. It is fundamentally, most importantly to me, pro-Americanism. And, there was a poll of Trump voters right after President Trump was elected asking if wealthy people or higher income people should pay more taxes so that everybody can have health insurance. An overwhelming majority of Trump supporters, I'm not talking about all Republicans, I'm not talking about Liz Cheney Republicans, I'm talking about Trump voters, agreed with that. Now, are they socialists? No. So we're branding things that will make America stronger as socialism, and we are saying things and doing things, or not speaking out about things that make people scared of Republicans and scared certainly of conservatives. And that is a huge, and I think that's the root of the problem. That is the issue that we have. It is not that conservatives need to be liberal on everything. I think they do need to stop calling everything that'll make America better for a lot of people, including conservative, socialism. Socialism is when the government takes over the primary means of production in the economy. When the government takes over Verizon and takes over all the big companies, General Motors, Ford, Facebook, Apple, when the government takes ownership of those companies, that's socialism. Providing a safety net is not socialism.
I want to ask a question to that, because I don't agree necessarily with what you're saying, right? Because what the left does, and I'm going to take Elizabeth Warren on this one, right? She says the same thing, right? We just want to give everybody health care, right? But it's not socialism, right? No, it's just going to be a government private sector partnership. What she means is government, through its regulation, through its arm, through its strength, through its force, will make those companies do what it wants. So do they have direct ownership? No. But do they have complete control and power through regulation? Yes. So, that in itself, them opening a back door to get to it doesn't negate that that's where they're going. And so as a conservative, my answer would be, that instead of saying, okay, let's have this national program that gives everybody health care, why can't we remove all the regulations that they've put in locally that makes it impossible to open clinics, that makes it impossible for straight on doctor-patient conferences to happen where the doctors can choose how much they want to charge. They can choose their own networks and how they want to operate. Right now, they have no power to do any of that. So do we have a actual, I want to say free market, but a free market way to put in healthcare? We could. But if we are moving to just discussing this national way to do it, we've already abandoned conservatism. So even if you don't want to call it socialism or call it Marxism, what it's definitely not is conservatism.
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. In other words, I think it's possible, and I'm sure those Trump voters who were asked if everybody should have health insurance did not want a big, overweening government program. They just wanted to make sure everybody had health insurance. And I think we can do both. Obamacare basically provided a subsidy so that people that can't afford private health insurance can get it. But it also introduced a plethora of regulations, as you point out, that constricted the healthcare industry, limited options.
That raised the cost. So now people have health insurance, but they don't have access to doctors. So
we can do both.
If that is what we're setting up, then it can be nice for you in theory to say, yeah, everybody has health care. Look at us, pat ourselves on the back. But those people can't actually access the health care. And so, I'm not saying this just to be combative. I'm thinking about, the doctor down in Florida that went to a low access area of health care. And he decided to do free testing for COVID and try to help people in that area that did not have access to health care. He was shut down. He was threatened with fines. He was threatened with jail time for just trying to give freely of himself with the knowledge that he has. See, and that's what I mean. They have shut off every avenue for us to be able to create these systems ourselves locally. They shut that off. They shut it down. They use force to do it. And then they say, okay, now we can discuss taking from this group to give to this group to make sure this happens. No, there is another way. If those doctors are willing to go to those areas, if they are willing to open clinics, if they are willing to help people, why is it government saying that they cannot? And if you can't answer that question first, the question of healthcare is negligible at that point, because the doctors that are actually needed are not going to be where they need to be. And that is a real problem. Again, we saw with COVID, where they create these big medical healthcare centers. But then when something like COVID hits, you can't go into them because they're scared to death of actually having so many people in one spot. So now cancer patients aren't going in for treatment. Regular diagnoses are being missed and not being made because everybody is scared to go into these big clinical centers where COVID is probably festering. The government has done a lot to make healthcare a toxic area of conversation. And if we can remove some of that government toxicity, we can probably come up with a lot of free market answers that don't require class warfare.
I totally agree with you. And again, Sonnie, I think the problem is, and I think this is, maybe it's a nuance that the article that we're talking about missed. And that is, you don't have to default from one to the other. It isn't either or. In other words, if we can all agree, if a majority of Trump supporters, and certainly a majority on the left, agree everybody should have health care, but if you need cancer treatment or if you need a heart bypass, you do need insurance to cover that. If they can agree on that basic idea, and then everybody talks, we have a government that's supposed to be of the people, then we can work it out and we can find a much better combination than we have now. So in other words, we can provide health insurance for people through the private sector, which Love it or hate it is what Obamacare does. I mean, here in Texas, when Obamacare first started, there was only one company, Blue Cross, providing the health insurance plans in the Texas area under Obamacare. Now there are 5 or 10 that are competing. So I would call that free market. But on the other hand, as you pointed out, you have a lot of onerous regulations that keep providers from being innovative and providing services in underserved areas. So guess what? We can do both. We can fix the stupid stuff, take the stupid stuff out, and keep the stuff that makes sense in. But the problem, Sonnie, is, and this is the nuance I was alluding to, if conservatives basically say we can't have any health care policy, the government shouldn't be in health care, well, their own supporters, Trump supporters, don't agree with that. So you're not going to get very far. Conservatives need to be at the table so that they can take the stupid out. They can take the stupid out of the ideas, and they can say, okay, we can buy in. We can go along with subsidizing private health insurance, but we're not going to go along with the crazy regulations. We're not going to go along with shutting down doctors that are trying to be innovative or trying to move into underserved areas. Guess what? We can do both. But if the Republicans and the conservatives are not even at the table, because they're not even listening to their own constituents who believe everybody should have health insurance, they're not going to be able to fix these programs and make them better instead of stupid. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
I would say even those Trump voters from 2016, I would say after COVID, after seeing government say these shots are mandatory, what is going to happen when they say it's mandatory and they control your health care? Like this, I think a lot of those conservatives that believe that will now second guess that a little bit if they recognize how much government control has been put into the system and how that system is willing to wield that control. If you're going to give that control to a Fauci, how many Republicans would still respond the exact same way? Even Trump voters, how many would respond the exact same way? We're running out of time. I appreciate you coming through. Like, these are conversations that we need to be having on the right. And it's just a shame there are not more people like you that are just willing and unafraid just to have basic conversations. I don't think I tore your head off, or I don't think I branded you a racist or did any of those things. And yet a large portion of those on the right think that that's what this conversation always devolves into. So I appreciate, again, you just willing to come through and just chop it up with it.
Always a joy to be with you, Sonnie. Thank you.
Thank you so much.